Hi there.
Hello. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome everyone. We are really pleased today to start our event on the book launch for the Home Renaissance Foundation book, People Care and Work in the Home. We have a good lineup and brilliant speakers with us today who have been contributors and working on the production of this incredibly important book at a very critical point in time. My name is Professor Mohammed Gamal Abdelmanam. I am a chair in architecture and the director for the Center for Architecture, Urbanism and Global Heritage at Nottingham Trent University. And with my colleague, Professor Antonio Arganduna, we have both edited the book in collaboration with Home Renaissance Foundation. We have a good audience today, and I have a number of housekeeping points to make. Could I please ask all participants and those who will join us to keep their videos and camera off and mute their mics. The event today will be video recorded and will be shared later on social media and the platforms of Nottingham Trent University and Home Renaissance Foundation. We will be running a Q&A session toward the end of the event today. So please, whenever we will not be able to take questions after each talk. So if you have any questions during the talk, please write it in the chat box. We have support team, Susan Beatfield and myself will be looking at the chat box and filtering all the questions so we can pose them and present them to the speakers at the end of the day. First, I would like to start by introducing our chair of the event today, Brian Sanderson, CBE, Chairman of Home Renaissance Foundation. Brian is the founding director of the Home Renaissance Foundation and Chairman of the Low Pay Commission. He was Managing Director of British Petroleum, Chairman of BUBA and Standard Chartered Bank. He also helped establish the Learning and Skills Council as its first chairman. He served as a vice chairman of the Court of Governors at LSE and is a trustee of the Economist Group. Brian, thank you for chairing the event today, and the screen of yours for the introduction. If you'd like me to unshare my screen, please let me know.
Thank you, Hamal, and big welcome to everybody. This meeting had its origins 3 years ago now in a conference we had when you could have conferences and actually meet with people about care and work and people in the home. And it sort of encapsulated what Home Renaissance is about. It's about pushing forward all aspects of the importance of the home for care for everybody, children, of course, in particular, but also older people, which we'll be hearing more about later, and just providing a base which is secure and a refuge for anybody who is part of it. So it is about protection of the family. Now, we didn't realize when we were having this conference that by the time we got the book together, and a big thank you to Hamal and Antonio for anchoring all that. It's been a very laborious process. We didn't realize just how pertinent it was going to be, of course, at this time, but it could hardly be more topical than it is today for lots of the wrong reasons. A great many people, of course, have suffered a lot and still are in all of our countries over the last few months. And although we now appear to have an end in sight, thanks to new vaccines, it's still some way off. And it's as well to remember that this is going out at a time of great need for the sort of thing that we are missionaries for. So with that, I mean, I think I would need only to say, again, thank you to Hamal and Antonio for putting this book together. And also a big thank you to the contributors to the book, two of whom, Baroness Sheila Holland and Lord Richard Best, we have here to present to us today. They're tireless workers for the values we hold dear in the House of Lords, both of them. and it's a great privilege to have you both here. So with that, can I just hand back to Kamal to anchor the proceedings? Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Brian. And really, we are grateful to your incredible support to the book and to our work with you on the conference. And this is just a brilliant start for my talk. My role today is just to provide a brief outline of the structure of the book. For managing things online, we have to make it condensed, and we were planning a number of launch events across the UK and Europe. But here we are, we have to do these things online, and we have to make sure that they are accessible as possible. So as Brian briefly mentioned, the origin of the book started in one of the important conferences that the Home Renaissance Foundation under Brian's leadership advocate, which was in 2017, a home place of growth, care, and well-being. The conference included an incredible number of lineup on talks, and as you know, in 2017 was all pre-pandemic. And we have been incredibly grateful for over the past 3 years to work with a hardworking and credible team of the Home Renaissance Foundation to put material together, to have lots of submission, reviews, editorials, until we reach it to the final stage which has been produced in June 2020. Overall, the book has a clear agenda, which is trying to address societal challenges to the home. Home as a center to society and to center to its transformation. And in that sense, the agenda of the book was actually trying to look at those societal challenges and how the relationship between home, family, within organization and space have been changing over time. And this is pre-COVID, where there is a lot of greater distances between work and home were emerging. People working at long distances, which actually added a lot of pressure on the home. How care for family, children, and elderly have been emerging as a major part of the challenging our current association with the home. How such pressure of older population and the care for them have become so demanding on the national and international economy that alternative means and operations at the home was already investigated. Over the past few months, as you would have known, there's a lot of policies in the UK in particular about future homes and setting new standards and looking at climate change. And in that sense, the management of households and its efficiency become a central stage to the running of the economy. And of course, can I ask for everybody to really please mute your mics? And of course comes COVID-19, sorry. And of course, in 2020 and before the book being published, just came COVID-19. And we have, to a certain extent, we have realized how home is becoming central, not to the economy, politics, operation, organization, and workplaces. In that sense, that the home and its resilience become a very important center stage to the change in the way our economy operates. How in technology have facilitated a lot of those working from home operations. And also we have additional pressure like homeschooling and people caring and working at home at the same time. In these instances, I think we like to look at, this is a time where the home needs to be investigated again, need to be interrogated through an intellectual and practical perception. How it operates in real life situation, what are the challenges that comes from different conditions and contexts, but also as a notion, as an environment, and looking at its complex and multi-layered nature. The home is a contested environment where several processes, interactions, and engagements at work, from workplaces, domestic work, caring for children, for disabled individuals, and for older people. And such endeavor cannot be done by a single discipline or a single specialist. That's why we looked at it as multidisciplinary inquiry, where different fields of studies and knowledge and research, from policymakers to practitioners to academics and practitioners are really important. Then the book looked at the different experiences, situations, and challenges of the home, diagnostic investigation and looking at diagnostic investigations of a number of issues, looking at health care, work and engagement, and trying to find examples and experiences from real life situations to look at impact on home on its people. To that extent, the book is divided. We started with a foreword. The book structure started with a foreword by Brian, which set out the scene of the Home Renaissance Foundation. It's incredible work over the past decade, 2 decades, is just in developing such kind of agenda, putting home back into the center stage of understanding the relationship between family and society. And we had a preface by Sir Harry Burns. The book then divided into 3 thematic parts, one on care, on people, and on work. Each one of those sections started by a feature article by a very prominent figure in research and policy making in the British and international context, where they have really shed light about the challenges of the home in a certain factor or certain studies and policy making context. And for part 1, which looked at home and care, we start with a feature article by Lord Richard Best, who will really give us a brief outline of his talk and his chapter. And in part 2, we had a feature article by Professor Sheila Zabaranis Holland, who looked at my home and my life. And for part 3, which included another further 5 chapters, we had a feature article by Jose Victor Oron on Up to You, and which is looking at education in domestic environments. Those chapters actually have shed the lights of certain aspects of the relationship between the home and people, setting examples, looking at specific conditions, and try to analyze them in different contexts. Hence, each chapter contributed a very significant idea and practical examples. Same thing happened with the home and work with a feature and the same thing for all of the other sections. This is just a quick outline. The book is available now for sale and could be purchased. And I'm really incredibly grateful for all the speakers today and all contributors and my dear co-editor, Antonio Argandona. So without a further ado, I think this is just to give a brief outline, and considering time, I will need now to move to the next speaker on the program today, which is Lord Richard Best. I will stop my screen for a minute and for Lord Best to really be the main speaker, and I will, if he allows me, I will introduce him briefly. Lord Richard Best co-chairs the all-party parliamentary group on housing and care for older people, and he chaired its recent inquiry, Rural Housing for an Aging Population, Preserving Independence. He is the vice president at the Town and County Planning Association and the vice president, formerly president of the Local Government Association. Until May 2017, he was the chair of the Property Ombudsman Council and the House of Lords Select Committee on Communications. Previously, Lord Best was the chair of the Hanover Housing Association, chief executive of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and before that, the National Housing Federation. Lord Best, the screen is yours, and we are very grateful for having you with us today.
Thank you very much, Hamal, and indeed thank you, Brian, for hosting us. It's a great book, People Care and Work in the Home. There's my copy. One of its many good features is that it has a few blank pages at the back, which I've now filled out with my later thoughts on the theme that was chosen for me. My bit is just a small part of the whole, but it relates to the home for those in later life. A Home for Later Life was my chapter. And I've been thinking about what has changed since we put it together. Time has passed. And indeed, my CV has changed quite a bit since then. Things have moved on. But of course, they moved on most significantly in respect of the dreaded ghastly COVID pandemic. And I want to just spend some time in thinking through the changes that COVID has made to the kind of case I was setting out in support of there being more attention given to the home for older people. I was already saying just how significant the home was for those in later life. They're going to spend nearly all of their life, the rest of their life, in that particular place, in that home. The home has to matter incredibly to those people. But hasn't COVID brought this home to us? Hasn't this emphasized and underlined just how important it is to have a home where you can flourish and thrive and not suffer in the ways that the home can make us suffer in so many respects. I'm going to look at the COVID impact on our thinking about the home and possibly the legacy that it will leave afterwards as we consider the homes for everybody in their later life. Well, the first thing, of course, is space. And although we think of space and the confines of being in a pokey, small, indeed even one-room apartment, we think of the consequences for families, for trying to bring up children, for homeschooling in cramped and overcrowded conditions. And we think how ghastly that must be. And those of us who have a home with space around us just know how lucky we are and how different our lives are to those of families cooped up in tiny space. Indeed, I was just hearing how in a block of flats where so many of the families are off the ground, they're not even at ground level, are not getting out and about, even the lift is a problem, because who do you share the lift with? Have you put your mask on? Have you touched the buttons on the lift in your tower block? Everything about the place is not designed to make us safe and secure at a time of a pandemic, but space within the home is so critical. Space in which to work for some, to educate your children for others, a second bedroom if you're an older person, so a carer can stay overnight rather than paying a fleeting visit, dressed possibly in full PPE to come and provide care for you in your home. A second bedroom allowing a daughter, a sister, a relation, an informal carer to stay there rather than a bedsit or a single bedroom apartment. Space turns out to be so important, even if you're a couple. And how much better it's been to be a couple in these COVID days than to be entirely on your own. But even if you're in a couple, that second bedroom is incredibly important so that you're not on top of each other 24/7. The extra cost of a spare room is a really important investment for us, providing social housing, for us acquiring our own accommodation in later life. 2 bedrooms. Extra space for older people's housing. But space outside of the flat, the apartment, the bungalow, space outside is incredibly important as well. And in London, we now insist on there being balconies. Everybody needs a balcony. You may think a small apartment, why would you need a balcony? My goodness, COVID has taught us. You need a balcony, you need some space. Just get out into the fresh air for a bit. Possibly see your neighbor at a good social distance, balcony to balcony. But there must be an opportunity to get out. A lot of older people are not going out for an hour to take exercise, go for a run. They are going to stay inside. That balcony is all important. And indeed, wherever possible, a bit of garden to get into and to walk around the place where you're living. How we treasure the garden now. And I wonder whether one of the long-term consequences is that people will be more reluctant to downsize, to, as I say in my piece, to right size, to move in older age to somewhere that's more manageable, more economic, more warm, energy efficient, in every way more suitable and more accessible, but without possibly the spare space, without the garden, Will people find right sizing less attractive in the future? Will we see less of a market for the private sector in providing apartments that are specifically tailor-made for those in retirement? Will more people want to stay where they are, having experienced the value of having a bit of extra space about them, even if it's at a cost? I think that there could be a greater emphasis on home adaptations, of trying to make the place where you are more suitable for you, and a bit less of an influence of a trend toward moving on to somewhere that we have advocated as being the right size for you, but maybe a bit more compressed. Well, who knows? I think the counter argument is that connectivity, being part of a social group, having potential companions and colleagues around you, which you get in a retirement development, flats that are for older people, are age exclusive, as we say, to move to a place where you're not entirely on your own, where there's somebody who can come and provide just that bit of help when you need it, where you don't have problems with the maintenance of your property, which can be really difficult to organize, not just during a pandemic, but generally in older age, somewhere where somebody else takes the strain. Maybe some of those ingredients will mean that the thought of moving on, moving to somewhere more suited in terms of accessibility, no stairs, a walk-in shower in the bathroom, in many ways a much more suitable home. Maybe it will be the social aspects rather than the physical aspects in the end that count. And being in a community of older people may be something that we do treasure, having been on our own as single older people, and possibly facing loneliness and the isolation of that. Those who bought that lovely cottage in the village, in the countryside, that was fine when they could get in the car and go and visit their friends and relations, go shopping and do the rest. But when they're housebound, and when COVID just shows us what it's like to be there, stuck indoors, stuck in the place all the time, without company, without people around, maybe we will treasure the idea a bit more of moving somewhere where there is companionship laid on. I remember when I was at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, we created a retirement community to the north of York. It's for about 200 older people, with bungalows around a central care center and a cafe and restaurant. It's a super community, very long waiting list, I'm afraid I have to tell you, if you're thinking of living in York. But I went to an open day for new residents not so long ago, and it reminded me of Freshers' Week at university. There were all the people with their stalls, all the societies that you could join, the National Trust outings, the painting club, the woodworking club, there was so much that you could do. This was a community, and you weren't going to be lonely. You weren't going to be on your own. Maybe will appreciate more the value of being in a place where there is built-in a social connectivity of that kind. Well, the other thing I think we've learned during COVID is how important this blooming technology is. Those of us who have been rather reluctant to adopt IT, here we all are on Zoom, an amazing thing. I was on a Zoom call yesterday and there were 478 people on the call. How could we imagine bringing everybody together in that way? And at the individual level, at the level of the home, the opportunity to talk to our relations and friends through the miracles of technology, on FaceTime, never mind Zoom, on Skype, talking to our friends and family. This has become so important to us. What would we have done, some of us, without that kind of connectivity from our home, from our otherwise potential isolation? My family have a Sunday morning Zoom, and I've got family in Melbourne, Tokyo, London, and Yorkshire. And we all meet on Sunday mornings and talk to each other and share and catch up on grandchildren and the rest. what a miracle. And we have been forced to learn and adopt this technology and understand it and spread it to our colleagues who have been even more reluctant than ourselves. And this has made, this I think has probably speeded up by 5 or 10 years, a process that was there. Well, my theme of the home being key to happiness, well-being, health in later life, to being the place where you don't want accidents, you don't want to be stuck in hospital, unable to be discharged home because the home is so unsuitable. You don't want cold and damp conditions of the kind that Sir Michael Marmot has drawn our attention to, leading to those premature winter deaths. COVID has underlined all of the reasons why a decent home is so important in later life. Indeed, even if you've had COVID, even if you're not likely to catch COVID again, it can leave you with respiratory problems, which a damp or cold home is going to make totally unsuitable as this winter continues. We do need more new homes for older people. We need those who are in owner-occupied property, which now is become dilapidated, or which simply needs to be more, to be smaller and more manageable for us in our older age. As tenants in the private rented sector, we need to move to somewhere very often that is more secure, that is properly suited to our needs. And we can't get the private rented property to be adapted just for us. And indeed, we can find the rents rising in the private sector after we've retired and we no longer have the same income as we did when we were working. We can find those rents too high for us, and we're going to need social rented housing. We've got to be building everywhere. As part of the drive to end the acute housing shortages that afflict this country, we've got to include accommodation that is tailor-made, perfectly suited for older people who can't stay where they are and for whom something more suitable can be created. We need the planners to recognize and understand that. We need central government to be supporting those moves, to be supporting the housing associations and councils that are building to meet those needs, because, and COVID has underlined this, the home is so fundamental to our future well-being, health and happiness in older age. And I commend the book for its many ingredients, and hope those of you who get it will have a look too at the bit that concerns older people in and their housing in later life. Thank you very much, Hamal. Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you very much, Lord Best. We really appreciate your incredible contribution to the book conference and today's event. I'm sure there will be a few questions to you, but we will take those questions toward the end of the event today. If you allow me, then we'll move to the next item on the program. And the next item of the program will be a pre-recorded video. Will be a pre-recorded video by Dr. Nahili Grieves Fernandez. Before starting the video, I will try to give a brief introduction to Dr. Nahili Grieves. She is a researcher at ESDAI, Universidad Panamericana, where she teaches food biochemistry to undergraduates. She is a pharmaceutical chemist and has an MS degree in biochemistry and a diploma in public communications of science, both from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, as well as a PhD in science education from the University of York in the UK. So this is a very short video about the chapter that Dr. Grieves have authored and contributed to the book.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. My name is Nayeli Grieves, and together with Mari Carmen Rabiela, we wrote a chapter for this book called Unsafe Food Handling and Preparation of Food in Poor Households. Traditionally, the home has been regarded as a place of well-being, a place where we can be safe, However, the unsanitary handling of foods can make our home unsafe. Okay, there is some specialized knowledge that we need to know in order to ensure that our products are prepared in a safe way. So we have to clean our hands, separate raw food from cooked food, cook it properly, and chill it and store it properly. Okay, and if you don't have that specialized knowledge, it can cause problems with the health of the people that live with you, especially if they are vulnerable people. The research that Mari Carmen and I carried out actually aim to determine which high-risk practices occur in poor households in Mexico. So we went to visit several homes, and we tried to determine which were the practices that were posing a danger for the inhabitants of the home. So for example, we used checklists, or we did field observations, semi-structured interviews, in order to determine how people purchased, prepared, stored, and ate their food. Then we realized that the highest risk was that the people weren't storing their food properly. So they were leaving the food out for several hours after preparing it, and that's due to very long working periods, and that they, for example, sometimes they cooked at night, or that they cooked in the morning and they left the food on the stove all day in order for the people who was getting into their house to serve themselves. People weren't washing their hands properly, or even if they were washing their hands, especially the women that were cooking, or they weren't disinfecting the food properly. They tried to disinfect it, but they didn't follow the instructions in the disinfectant. And one of the main risks that we observed was that the use of kitchen clothes, they use the kitchen cloth for everything. So that was a real problem. So this chapter is really important because these are common practices that they don't only occur in some kitchens, they occur in most kitchens. So we have to be aware, and our aim is to prepare some further materials in order to prepare the people to cook properly and to handle food safely, in order to ensure that they are safe within their home. Thank you very much.
Really appreciate the talk from Dr. Grieves, who has been speaking to us from Mexico. And as you would see, that there is some of the speakers coming from different parts of the world, and hence it was not easy to have her live with us. Now we will move to the second part of the book, which features a very important, I think, and critically acclaimed article by Professor Sheila Zabaranis Holland, titled "My Home and My Life." If you just give me a second, I will share the screen and I will provide a small introductory to Baroness Holland. Baroness Holland is an independent. My apologies, there seemed to be a technical issue when I'm, so my internet keeps disconnecting me. So my apologies for that. So do you see my screen now?
Yes.
All right. So I will, sorry for that. Just I will introduce Professor Sheila Zabaranis Holland, who is an independent cross-bench life peer in the House of Lords and an emeritus professor of psychiatry of disability at St. George's University of London. She has been a clinical specialist, researcher, and policymaker in mental health, and she has published both scientific and professional papers and books. In 1989, she founded the long-running Books Beyond Words series of picture books for young people and adults with developmental intellectual disabilities, which includes stories about everyday life, such as moving homes, as well as physical and mental health and criminal justice. Baroness Holland was president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, 2005-2008, president of the British Medical Association, 2012-13, and chair of the Board of Science of the British Medical Association, 2013-16. She has completed a 4-year term as a member of a Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors and Vulnerable Adults in 2017, and she is currently the president of the Royal College of Occupational Therapists. Baroness Holland, the screen is yours, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Gamal. Well, congratulations to Brian and everyone at the Human Renaissance Foundation, and especially Gamal and Antonio for putting this magnificent volume of essays together. In anticipation of today, I reread the presentation that I gave to the conference in 2017. So much has happened since then, and yet so much remains the same. Even before the pandemic, some economists were espousing a new economics that recognised home, family, and care as of equal importance to the state and the market, and one that recognises our shared role as stewards for our limited world resources. Lockdown has helped many of us reevaluate what's important in our own lives. Some are calling for a greater emphasis on a culture of care. And I'm sure we've all noticed and celebrated carers during these last long months. A truly caring society would welcome and celebrate difference in human beings and would strive to support people who struggle to cope in our complex world, people who need extra help to live an ordinary life. So during the pandemic, most of us have had to spend much more time at home than we might have liked. But there are some who don't live in an ordinary place called home, even in ordinary times, people who don't belong to a family household. And this has been even more true during the pandemic. We've all heard stories in the news about elderly people in care homes who haven't been able to see their families and friends. And they may have been able to enjoy the kind of social support that Lord Best spoke about from within their residential or supported living setting. But how many people know what has been happening to people with intellectual disabilities? You see, about half of all adults with learning disability who are known to services live in care homes or in supported tenancies. And their support bubbles were tenants or residents and staff. During the pandemic, people and their families had a choice: either stay in the care setting and risk not seeing family and friends, or go home to stay with elderly parents. Both brought risks. The mortality rate for people with intellectual disabilities has been similar or higher than the mortality rate for over 65s, and not just for those living in congregate settings. And for those who already lived with family, the usual routines of daycare, social activities, and so on all stopped, so that the care that families suddenly found themselves providing grew exponentially. My son lives next door to us. He needed nursing through COVID last March, and since then has spent every day in my house. His girlfriend remains in residential care. They haven't been allowed to see each other for 10 months. But we've enjoyed bringing in the food deliveries and peeling carrots together. We've learned and shared some important lessons. The internet has been a lifesaver for everyone who's been able to get online. I've contributed to many webinars. I've enjoyed listening to many more. My work has come home, even my parliamentary work. And the work of the charity that I founded, Books Beyond Words, has created new free wordless stories, as well as guidance for families and carers to help them manage this time better at home. We started with a story, a wordless story called Beating the Virus, based on my son's experience. Here it is in German. Not that it matters very much if you don't speak German, because in fact, once you get past the title page, it's entirely in pictures. It's probably been downloaded 100,000 times because it was free. And we've expanded it to include being tested for COVID and now being vaccinated. We moved on to mental health recovery stories for children and adults because of the increased stress that the uncertainties and privations of recent months have caused. We've succeeded in connecting many people by creating online book clubs where our stories can be screen shared and discussed by the members. This has meant people having to get online and learning to use Zoom. Travel problems used to be the main barrier to getting people with intellectual disabilities together. Now it's having the hardware and the digital skills. But it's been easier than we thought getting people online. They've usually needed one-to-one support to build their confidence, and we've often needed to buy people a tablet too. In some ways, we found that discussing experiences and feelings in the safety of their own home has proved easier than getting a group started in a library. And that's where, in normal times, our book clubs take place. I can hear my son in the next room chatting to somebody on Skype. He might even come and join us, who knows? Home is a safe and accepting place for most of us. But we've had to create resources about domestic abuse as well, stories that are sadly needed more than ever in lockdown. And the power of these wordless stories is in their empowerment of a marginalised minority who seek to belong, but face barriers of ignorance and attitudes which exclude. My role as an advocate in many leadership positions is to invite others, people who don't have somebody in their family with intellectual disability, to stop and think. What about people with intellectual disabilities and or autistic people? How many people considering a situation will ask themselves, how would it affect people with intellectual disabilities? When you look at a subject, a situation, an issue, a policy, whether you have in your mind as the first question, how would this affect people with intellectual disabilities? If we did that, would we be more likely to get it right for everybody else than the other way around? If we wait and ask that question last, it's too late. You don't think about people with intellectual disabilities, unfortunately, unless you have somebody in your family. You probably don't have the language. You may not quite know how to talk about it because it's not part of your everyday conversation. Empowerment and having social relationships of different kinds go hand in hand. We all know that our mental health is better when we feel in some small measure in control. It may be an illusion, but that sense of empowerment is really, really fundamental. That you aren't always somebody who's being told what to do, that you belong. Gamal, could you just show my last couple of slides? You see, this can start with an ordinary home in an ordinary street. And if you move on to the next slide, along with a disability arts charity called Access All Areas and partners at the Open University, 2 or 3 years ago, we created the Belong Manifesto. And it addresses the essential elements of mental health and well-being that are actually relevant to all of us. But we put it in words that the actors we were working with, the actors with intellectual disabilities and autism, described. Being active and healthy, enjoying our friends and family and showing them we care, loving ourselves and welcoming other people's love and support, and accepting help when things go wrong. Ordinary things like choosing where we live and what we do and share. And new things to make our life more interesting, like drama, drawing, singing, but learning something new, having a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And probably the most important one is being able to give something to other people. And that seems to correlate more with mental health for all of us than any of the others. So these were all really important things. And the last slide. This is just some people sharing books together. My son's one of the people in the story on the right. And the next slide. So the Belong Manifesto addresses the essential elements of mental health and well-being, all relevant to the book the Home Renaissance Foundation is launching today. Can you finish the slides, please, Gamal? And I just wanted to say that somewhere I've got my copy of the book. I'm just really proud to be part of today's launch and to commend this book to you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Baroness Holland. I'm really grateful for endorsing the book and your incredible contribution to it throughout. One thing that we need really, perhaps our audience today don't realize that this fantastic contribution from all contributors, including Lord Best and yourself, it's the debate, the intellectual debate that we had with yourself throughout the discussion and to get this and to inform the agenda of the book and its aims. Thank you very much. And as said earlier, just will be questions coming to you. So please stay with us for the Q&A session towards the end. So now for as demonstration of some of the chapters and this part, just we have another video, which is I will share now, pre-recorded video by our colleague, Dr. Uchi Ilzomba from Nigeria. And I will give a brief introduction to Dr. Ilzomba, who is currently a full-time lecturer at the Institute of Humanities, Pan-Atlantic University, Lagos, Nigeria. She has worked as an industrial chemist at Johel in Nigeria Limited, an FDAC and ISO certified private pharmaceutical company in the southeast of Nigeria. She has also worked as a facility manager and later as an administrative officer for Atlantica Cultural Center in Lagos, a private non-profit organization providing multifaceted personal, cultural, and professional development for young girls. From October 2013 to June 2018, she held and completed a 5-year studies scholarship at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome, Italy, specializing in philosophical ethics and anthropology. Here is a pre-recorded video by Dr. Ilzomba.
Gamal, we don't seem to have any sound on this video. You unmute yourself, Gamal.
Sorry for that. Sorry for such technical issue. I will stop sharing and I will reshare it again.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Osochi Ilozumba.
Is it now okay?
It's still quite faint, actually, Gamal.
I authored the. Hello, my name is Osochi Ilozumba. I authored the chapter in the book People Care and Work in the Home. The topic of my chapter is the home as the primary source of intellectual development of the child, from a philosophical and phenomenological perspective. So this chapter is based on 3 main authors who I think have contributed a lot in showcasing to the world the different ways that the human person from the early childhood to the adulthood develops. So beginning from this particular author, who is called Eugenio Sarti, he, from an experimental perspective, try to demonstrate in a theoretical way the 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 manner that the human person assimilates or responds to stimulus and has a kind of receptive transmissive relationship in his or her response to stimulus. Now, we all know that we don't learn anything in an innate way. We learn from experience, we learn from our exposure to the world. And this is what Eugenio Sarti has tried to present to the people. And I borrowed that theory to show that the child, from the very first moment it opens its eyes, there is a simultaneous, intense, and well, immense accumulation of data from the outside. And this accumulation of data from the outside is already the very first process of learning. It's already the very first process of its immersion into the world and its first step to development intellectually. Now, passing from this scientific experimental perspective of Eugenio Sarti, my chapter borrowed from Jean Piaget's child development theory, the psychological part of the child development. And we all know, I think, yeah, we all know that Jean Piaget has a lot of things to offer in his theory. Okay, so then passing from that, I concluded with this particular author, who is Juan Sanguinetti. He's a philosopher, and he has a lot of contribution in 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 demonstrating that the human person is not just on the level of the scientific experimental level of intellectual development. Neither is a human person on the level of the psychological. Is the human person is transcendent. The human person goes beyond just what the physical realities can give us. And this is what my chapter has presented. But most importantly, it has shown that connecting it in using ordinary phenomenological experiences of the human person, it has shown the role that the home has in ensuring that these three stages of human development is achieved. And yeah, so this is what the chapter is.
My apologies for a little bit of technical glitches here about the quality of sound. Just may I wish to let all participants know and all partners know that this full video will be displayed on the social media for full sound quality if you haven't heard it fully well. And we are hopeful that all the recording today will be available for public access, because we, as you can see, some of the participants and contributors are coming from different parts of the world. It holds the timing is very much, the time zone is very much different to ours. Thanks, Dr. Irazomba, for her pre-recorded video. Now we move to the next item on the next talk on the program, Work at the Home, and this by my dear partner on this book and co-editor, Professor Antonio Arganduna. And Professor Arganduna, to briefly introduce him, he's an emeritus professor of economics and business ethics at IESE Business School. He has taught in universities of Barcelona, Malaga, and Navarra. He is a member of the Royal Academia de Ciencias Económicas y Financieras de España, or Royal Academy of Economics and Finance, chairman of the Committee of Standards and Professional Ethics of the Association of Economists of Catalonia, member of the Commission on Corporate Social Responsibility and Anti-Corruption of the International Chamber of Commerce of Paris, and the Commission on Control, Transparency of the FC Barcelona. He has published numerous books, articles, and on macroeconomics, monetary economics, Spanish and international economics, the home and family issues, business ethics, economic ethics, corporate social responsibility, and related topics. Antonio, the screen is yours. Please show your screen. You need to unmute yourself. I think you are still on mute because we can't hear your voice.
Now
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yes, it's okay now.
Thank you very much, Gamal. Thank you also to our
I think we have lost Antonio's connection. Susan, do you see Antonio?
We've just lost Antonio, unfortunately. I'll see if he's coming back in.
All right.
Might be a good time to ask for questions possibly to be sent via the chat facility.
Yes. All right. Dear all participants, we had at some stage, we all closer to 50 participants today in today's session. So because we will have following Professor Arganduna's talk, a session on Q&A, and would love to give more space to our participants and listeners to contribute with certain questions in reflection to the talks or to the book in general. So please just feel free to write your questions on the chat box and we'll pick it up and ask the right speakers to respond. Thank you very much. There must be a technical glitch somewhere, does it?
He's just coming back in. Here he is. We'll welcome him back with open arms.
Yeah, we're just working smoothly, and we thought that we will have a perfect session.
We're so ready.
I am very sorry. I just stopped the computer in the moment of beginning my presentation. Sorry for this.
No
this
worries,
is
Antonio.
my presentation. Let me.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present my chapter. My chapter on work at the home, purpose, function, and care is to explain the relationship between the function of the home, the shared purpose of the people working at the home, and the care generative virtues, because the home is a privileged space for the exercise of care. The chapter is long. Here I will present only some of the main ideas. The functions of the home, well, the home is a multi-purpose institution. The members of the home must be willing to undertake very different jobs because the home is a place of reproduction, nurture, learning, socialization, production of goods and services, care of children, the sick and the elderly. The home is restaurant, hotel, school, hospital, place of recreation, school of virtues. This is why the members of the home must be willing to undertake very different jobs in a long time and also every day. Perhaps the main function of the home is that it's a place where people learn to live. For example, the children can acquire knowledge, develop abilities, internalize rights, learn what is participation, mutual respect and freedom. And this is learned precisely in coexistence with the rest of the home's members. It's a joint, a shared learning. To understand what work at home is like, we have to start from the results we expect from our actions. Here I follow the theory of action. We can group the results in three blocks. Extrinsic results, what each one expects to receive, for example, the daily dinner. Intrinsic results, those that occur in each agent, such as learning to cook or satisfaction with a pleasant home environment. And transcendent results, what each one will provide to others with their work. These three types of results give rise to three types of motives to collaborate. What the agent expects to receive, what he hopes to achieve in himself, and what he is going to give to others. Receiving is important at home, but it is more important to achieve, to develop the capacities, and especially to learn to take into account the needs of others. It is to give. Much of the work at home is what they call collective, shared, or joint action or work, a form of social interaction whereby two or more people coordinate their actions in space and time to bring about the purpose that everyone wants to achieve, through probably for different motives. Collective or shared action implies interdependence among people and demands cooperation and coordination. In the paper, I distinguish 4 types of joint actions that we find in the home. First, coordinated individual actions. For example, when everyone collaborates in preparing the table for dinner. Here, the coordination is elementary, for example, agreeing on the arrangement of plates and glasses. Second, sequential interdependencies, when the work of one action depends on what another has done previously. For example, when cooking. Here, coordination takes the form of planning and scheduling, often is group agency, whose most obvious example is that of they have a joint purpose, shared social motives, and some form of friendship or companionship between all, which gives rise to the creation of trust, because each one expects the others to act as expected with full commitment, as consequences of seeking the good of others before the one good. The home is probably an environment in which group agency most frequently occurs. There are other implicit elements in those shared purposes. For example, the participation of children in preparing the table presents the risk of breaking a glass. But the implicit purpose is not only to have a well-arranged table, but above all to teach children to carry out actions in the service of others. Hence, the of learning processes, the development of skills, flexibility in the application of coordination mechanisms, and the final result is the creation of trust. This is why the value of the organization is greater than the sum of the contribution of its members, because their participation creates external effects or common goods that spill to others. Gifts and donations have an important place in the home. They form a comprehensive system of exchanges in which all are involved, including different generations. The home is not a market in which we are continually comparing what we give and what we receive. Some of the transfers occur in moments that are far between. It is not possible to compensate each service separately. There is no direct reciprocity, and there are many forms of unplanned compensation. For example, material goods can be distributed and spiritual goods can be shared. The most intense way of sharing is love. Love in these various forms is the virtue par excellence in the home. Benevolent love manifests when a person acts with transcendent motivation, that is, when he or she takes into consideration the needs of the other persons and seeks the good for the latter, not for the benefit that she herself will receive. The home experience takes us to the civilization of care. The ethics of care is a dimension of the ethics of love, insofar as it focuses not on abstract individuals, but on the needs of concrete persons. The care in the home forms one platform on which the daily ritual of receiving and giving takes place. In society, relationships between autonomous people are frequent. At the home, by contrast, many of these relationships involve vulnerable persons who are dependent of others, especially in the case of the children, the sick, and the elderly. Work in the home cannot be correctly understood if it is not taken into account that we are rational and social animals, that we seek autonomy, but also that we suffer from vulnerability. In the home, the autonomy of some individuals is at the service of the dependency of others. In short, in the home, people habitually move for transcendent motives, that is, seeking the good of others. Love is the main virtue, and the relationships are led by generosity, and the gift, this is by care. Then coordination of actions is possible beyond technical or sociological reasons by the unity achieved by virtues led by love. As a conclusion, the home can be a very pleasant organization that encourages everyone return and prompts affectionate memories of the past. but it can also be an unpleasant, hostile, oppressive place, where even its most altruistic and successful versions exert a tyrannous control of our mind and body, as the British anthropologist Mary Douglas said. Whether it is one or the other will depend on many factors, mainly on the dedication and work of those who make up the household or collaborate in it. I hope that the reading of the book may be useful for you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Antonio. Really informative as always. And thank you very much for your major role in putting the book and reviewing its chapters together, along with coordinating with your role at Home Renaissance Foundation. I think now we have reached a point where we can really get a few questions and answers. And I think there will be some questions coming from the audience. Susan, have we got certain questions, or should I take advantage of my role as a as a coordinator and ask a couple?
There's a couple of questions sitting in your inbox.
Yes, I can see them now.
Also your own questions as well. So perhaps you want to start with those, Gamal. That would be very welcome.
All right, thanks, Susan. So the first question to Baroness Holland. And question says, how important is offering as well as receiving care for those with intellectual disabilities?
If I understand the question properly, how important is it to both offer and receive?
Yes.
Well, so there was a huge research project called the Foresight Project in across Europe, looking at what constituted good mental health and what the contributory factors were, and giving and receiving were both really important. A lot of people don't like to be dependent on others. They want to be independent, to manage on their own, to be givers rather than receivers, and it's really, really important. So sometimes we don't recognize the gifts that people who we see as dependent actually contribute within our homes, within our families, within our communities. And so I think it's really, really important that we all see each other as both givers and receivers. So there's a short answer. But it's, it's true. So for example, I will leave for my son. If he lives next door, but if he is very slow, as he was this morning, to come to my house, I will still leave things for him to do. I won't do them for him, because he gets huge pride from contributing, and we thank him for them. And if he's going to be helping with cooking, then he'll bring his apron, and he's right there, he's doing it now. I shall be very pleased that he's set the table for lunch. And we've changed our eating arrangements in order to be able to accommodate his needs as well as everybody else's. So it's lovely. And yeah, he does things that are hard for me to do. He's tall, he can reach, he's strong. It's each gift that people give, is of equal value. And I always remember the funeral of a child that I knew who was 7 when she died, and she had cerebral palsy. She never spoke. She couldn't sit up. She couldn't hold her head up. But at her funeral, she sadly died so young. There were about 500 people, and there was such joy. And she had the most amazing smile.
Hindi ka pa nag-grocery.
And everybody who came, who met her, felt affirmed by her smile. Okay, that was a gift. She had that gift of helping you to feel like you mattered. Just beautiful.
Thanks a lot, Baroness Holland. I think this is very important to appreciate the reciprocal needs for both carers and their dependents as well. I think it's a very important aspect. Sometimes people forget about it. Next question to Lord Best. What are your thoughts on building for intergenerational living and care across generations? I think this has become very critical during the post-pandemic, Lord Best.
It has, and we've had mixed messages from COVID, because multi-generational households are the ones who have been worst affected in terms of spreading COVID from one generation to the next. And yet the companionship and having your family in one place during these difficult months is such a joy compared with the loneliness you can feel if you're just on your own. So it's brought us two conflicting messages, I think, the COVID pandemic. I have a brother who lives with his wife, his daughter and her husband, and their two small children, all in the same house. And the good news is that they've had a wonderful 9 months or however it is, being a great family together and doing everything together. The bad news is that I think it was the littlest ones brought home COVID, and they've all had COVID, and they've all been afflicted. But they're out the other side. They're even the worst ones, well over the worst. So, you know, it's not the end of the world for them, but it shows the fragility of the systems that we devise without expecting things like a pandemic.
Thanks a lot, Lord Best. There is a question to Antonio and myself. This session shows a great range in topics, from food preparation to philosophy. What is the advantage of this multidisciplinary approach? Antonio, would you like to start? And then I will add a few points.
I would say that the main interest of our approach is the global point of view of the home. We try to explain there are plenty of papers, plenty of books talking about the family, about the house, about the neighborhood, but it is difficult to find papers or books explaining this global way of thinking about the problems of the house. Let's think, for example, of the situation of unemployed people. There are plenty of papers explaining the psychological problems, the problems of the economic problems, the future of the difficulties of these persons in the future. But it's very difficult to find books or papers or articles that explain the consequences of this for the person inside the family, inside the home, inside the neighborhood. And this is the point of view of the home. We think our book is a contribution to the presentation of this problem, in this case, talking about people, care, and work. But the three dimensions are very important when explaining what are we doing with these problems in the home.
Thanks, Antonio. I would like to add a couple of points to your great answer. I think giving an example of what we are experiencing in COVID-19 pandemic response is just when you find that the home is the nucleus of so many things, and you cannot really deal with one factor without considering others. Once you ask people to work from home, then you find problems like mental health emerged, homeschooling, psychology, and the emotional gaps that appeared. And from the other hand, there is a food hygienics and the food voucher for those who really used to really be having the food supplies from their schools. So you'll find that an array of issues appeared once you are dealing of such kind of issues at home. And this tells you that when you are dealing with home, you cannot really look at one angle and forget others. And this is exactly what we have been working through this for a long time. And as I mentioned earlier, the book was pre-pandemic. It's just these are the normal challenges that researchers and scholars in different disciplines actually have been looking at for many years. And when we put the book together, we understand such complexity and multi-layered experiences that you cannot really look at the economics without the social aspects, and from homeschooling without the psychology and emotional commitments with the family. And these aspects, to be honest, what is the Home Renaissance Foundation have been advocating for many years. And I think the book somehow captured such interdisciplinarity, interdependence of different knowledge fields and inquiries together. And interestingly, when the COVID came, it just put this all under perspective and speed up our understanding of such issues. And I think the book just came at the right time to really address such multi-layered issues. Thank you for the questions. If no further question, I have a question to Lord Best. Lord Best, with regard, as you can see from, and I'm sure that you have been through a lot of discussion on this, because of the aging at home agenda and looking at how care homes have been challenged to the core with the spread of viruses, has this started to really influence the perception of policymaking towards the priorities of aging at home agenda, or trying to help people to really to develop certain approaches in that field?
Yes. Well, the care homes, of course, have been devastated by the pandemic. It's been just an absolute nightmare for the people who work there and the people who live there and the families and carers who want to visit the people who are there. And I think that what will linger and stay in the mind is a desire never to move to a care home if one can possibly help it. And this is already being expressed in the level of occupancy of care homes, which is down quite dramatically on a year ago. Not so much because of people dying who live there, but because of people not wanting to move in. The occupancy levels are down. That means the economics of running care homes is down. They're more financially difficult to sustain. We will see some losses of particularly smaller care homes, I think, as a result of the pandemic. It means that the alternative, which very often is a self-contained apartment where you can be separate and independent and live your own life, within a complex in which care is on tap. It's available if you need it, but it's not something that's compulsory. You don't have to sit in a cafe downstairs to eat your meals. You do have your own home. I think that combination, what we call extra care schemes or assisted living schemes, these will blossom, and care homes, I fear, however unfair it is, the opinion of the public will be we must do everything we can to keep our mothers, our fathers, our friends from moving in.
Thanks a lot, Lord Best. I think that's a very important issue, and thanks a lot for shedding some light on it. Are there any further questions? Yes, there is a question to Baroness Holland. Are things moving, in your opinion, are things moving in the right direction for people with intellectual disability being to choose where to live?
Yes and no. I mean, in some circumstances, it does seem to be improving, and of course it depends where in the world. You know, one of the sort of sadnesses has been that sometimes the kind of the Western preoccupation with creating congregate living settings, that people in less well-to-do countries have thought this was something to aspire towards, but it's not. On the other hand, you know, some people find themselves living very lonely lives if they do live in a tenancy on their own and without the support of neighbours. So it's not sufficient simply to have, you know, a front door key. It's also, it is part of being accepted by the other people who live in your street. My son had the experience before he moved back to live next door to us, of living in a little house next door to some other people who didn't appreciate him living there. They said very unkind things because they saw it as a private street that only people like them should live in. And this failure of ourselves really to accept people who are a bit different it can be a problem. And so, you know, one of the things is that if more people do live in the community, do live ordinary lives, more ordinary lives, are known when they go to the shops, then gradually that awareness and lack of fear of people who are different will lead to people being able to live comfortably and happily in their communities. So rather than being shut away, and sometimes, you know, the supported living, assisted living situations, if they're on the edge of the village, if people only go out in groups, that doesn't help integration. It doesn't help people to belong. And when you're still an adult of working age and you're trying to establish yourself, to find a role for yourself, you need that recognition, that presence. So there are some really lovely stories about how people are really feeling like they are there and they belong. But it's that awareness and friendship and smile and knowing somebody's name and just acknowledging, you know, the person who looks a little different. It works.
Thank you very much, Baroness Holland. I think that's we came to the conclusion of this Q&A session. And just before I hand over to our host and kind chair, Brian Sanderson, the chair of Home Renaissance Foundation, I would like to share a final few words of gratitude again to the Home Renaissance Foundation and its incredible team for first running the conference, supporting the book. They have worked with us day in, day out, and doing a lot of reviews, communication, and making sure that this event, even today, happen at perfect conditions. Thanks especially to Angela Di Miguel, Maria Brazy, and Susan Batefield, and above all, thanks to Antonio Arganduna, co-editor, and Mercy, who is the executive director for the Home Renaissance Foundation. And back to you, Brian, and we are really grateful for you to hosting us and helping us through this long process. Brian, back to you.
Muted, Brian.
You are muted, Brian, sorry.
I should have said was that you're managing the technology with considerable skill, Hamal, and I'm very grateful to you and to all the presenters today. These are many and complex issues, and multiplied, of course, by current circumstances, and threading a way through it all is, well, it's masterly and it takes a lot of doing. I would just add one thing, but from personal experience, I all my life have been a passionate gardener since I was a tiny child, and this has come back to help me enormously at the very latter stages, and in the pandemic over the last few weeks. And I suppose it's because there's always something to do. You can garden as intensively as you like, or and there's always hope. And we need hope, don't we, right now? We need something to look forward to, something which gives promise for tomorrow. If you have a garden, there's always something about to come up, about to come out, something which is an old friend returning. And even nowadays, wildlife is beginning to take control again. There's a robin that sits and waits for me every day, and will even eat out of my hand now. And it's these very tiny things, small things, which are distractions and which make life, you know, under the sort of pressures we've been under, and just sitting and listening to the endlessly depressing news, which we get hour after hour after hour, all of us. It's the little things which make all this bearable for me. And I would commend gardening to you, if any of those of you who have access to anything from balconies, as we were hearing, through to garden. So thank you all again. It was very gratifying. Talking of things to look forward to, I'm glad you all have enjoyed this book. We have another one coming out in, I'm not quite sure when, but I think April, May, which is about home in the digital age. Not something I would normally be compelled by, but I think right now it's going to be very appropriate, and we look forward to seeing a lot of you then for the presentation of that book. Thank you all again.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks for Home Renaissance Foundation. And we are very grateful for Lord Best, Baroness Holland, Professor Argaduna for being with us today. And we just shared again that we will be sharing this video on social media on the website of Nottingham Trent University and Home Renaissance Foundation. And if you have any questions, really stay in touch with us and we'll try to update you as soon as possible. The book is available, and I think there are some offers from time to time, so I hope that you read it all and enjoy it, and we welcome any feedback. Thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.